think we should get going. Without further ado, I would like to first welcome Dean and Lucy to today's webinar, Learning Content for the TikTok Generation. So guys, would you please just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Nando's, as I'm sure no one would have heard of it.
I'll let you introduce yourself first, Dean.
Thank you. So I'm Dean. I've worked for Nando's for 7 years. I worked in telecommunications before that. I look after the digital learning side of things. So myself and my team do everything related to digital learning. So content creation, looking after the platform, campaigns and comms around it. So yeah, and a little bit about Nando's. Nando's is a chicken restaurant with restaurants around the world, with the best peri-peri chicken in the world, I think. So yeah, that's us.
I agree.
And hi to everyone, I'm Lucy. So I'm Content and Partner Relationship Director here at Thrive. I've been here for about 3 months now, and really excited to work with some of our, all of our customers actually, and we'll be teasing out a little bit later and then onwards for the next few weeks about the exciting journey that we have for our content division over the next 12 to 18 months. Now, before Cassie starts with the questions, I just wanted to ask Dean a couple of pop questions about Nando's. So, and you've answered some of them already, actually, without prompting. So I've had to cancel quite a lot off my my piece of paper. But I have two really important ones for you. How many peri-peri chicken options are on the main menu, according to your website in the UK?
Oh wow! You already check my how many peri-peri options. I'm gonna.
Everyone can guess that, by the way.
Random guess.
I've just put it in the chat as well, so looking for guesses, everyone.
Yeah, I'm gonna go around 20 to 30 different options.
There's 10 actually.
No, there you go.
Yeah, 10. How many peri-peri infused extras are there on the menu? So this includes sauces.
Oh, Lucy, how many peri-peri infused extras are there on the menu? Yeah, 6 or 7.
There's 15.
Yeah.
15. To be fair to you, Dean, I asked that question in the Thrive office today and no one got it right, and they basically live on Nando's. So
I definitely need to brush up on my menu knowledge, don't I?
And while talking of peri-peri, Dean, everyone is very relieved to hear that that Nando's is hoping to fully reopen on Saturday. Now they found all of those peri-peri chickens that were on the loose somewhere.
Yeah, I was looking at social media. Apparently, Aldi have offered a hand as well. So I don't know if everybody's seen that on the social media. But
yeah, I saw that definitely.
It's quite interesting. But yeah, 100%. Obviously, a bit of a challenge for everybody in hospitality at the moment, but we'll be back up and running, ready to rock and roll by Saturday. Obviously, lots of restaurants still open anyway.
Awesome. And now we'll get to the meaty questions, and probably everyone will disappear now. That's probably what everyone wanted to know. So, Cass, over to you, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. I think your questions are the meaty ones, Lucy. So to get quite literally, so to get into it, I think the first question that is great just to address and answer, Dean, over to you, is who are the TikTok generation? We talk a lot about Gen Z and you talk a lot about your Nandockers. So to you, who are the TikTok generation? What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so this is really interesting, isn't it? It started with our conversation about who are the TikTok generation, and these are learners who have grown, who were born around the 90s and then kind of have been brought up in the noughties with technology. So they're a generation that have a high consumption of content. They are scrollers. They consume content rapidly, and they have a a low attention span to kind of large amounts of content. So yeah, it's it's interesting. My son falls into the Gen Z, but just watching him scroll through TikTok, and I suppose in the role that I'm in, I reflect on that and watch someone so young and watch how they kind of consume that content over a very short period of time and actually retain it, because you only have to look at the kids out there watching the dances that they do, what they're singing, some of the phrases that they're saying. They are obviously retaining a lot of the information that they're seeing. And this for me is the TikTok generation, and something that we should pay particular attention to in learning and development, especially from a digital side, watching how these habits are changing through the generations. Obviously, we're still in service of millennials as well. We're still a massive part of the consideration, but also what's coming through and how we're developing content ourselves. We need to pay particular focus to what we are dubbing as the TikTok generation.
Yeah, and I was reading interestingly that those Generation Zers will account for more than 20% of the working adults by the end of 2020. So as you say, they're the first generation raised entirely in the digital age. So and their characteristics are usually, quite independent and ambitious and value driven, but also really influenced by external factors and especially kind of social media. So I think what's really important as well is to push out and to give content that's relevant and correct. So if I think about some of our campaigns that have been about pride awareness, they're kind of really perfect for this generation because it gives a really concise and consistent message for everyone, where there's just so much messaging on social media, isn't there, sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and we talk about the TikTok generation, but you just look across the social media platforms in the way that content is now being consumed, even from the kind of early days of Facebook. We're now looking at Instagram, we're looking at Facebook, who have stories. That is the predominant way that when you log onto those social media platforms, you're consuming that content in a story-like manner. And again, a massive indication for what we're doing in learning and development, how maybe we can start to think about the content that we're generating and how we make it accessible for our learners, who obviously are accessing content from lots of different platforms in lots of different ways.
Definitely. And that's a really nice segue, Dean, onto our next question, which is actually, what can L&D learn from TikTok? You mentioned a little bit about storytelling there and a little bit about content sharing, but in your opinion, what does the world of L&D have to learn from things like TikTok?
Yeah, again, it's such a balance. And you're going to be very dependent on the topic that you're trying to share, but we have worked in a world where we've developed modules, and those modules have gone from what we've seen as regulatory training, like health and safety and stuff like that, which are 45-minute long modules. Trying to hold the attention of a Gen Zer with a 45-minute module is really difficult. So I suppose what we're learning, especially in my team and in Nando's, is where you can offer bite size and generate your content in bite size format. And when we're talking for bite size, we even have to move away from 20-minute modules, 15-minute modules. We need to go further than that and start to kind of generate content that is truly bite size, that you're talking about lots of videos, lots of music, displayed in a way that can be seen quite quickly over a short period of time. People can go back to it. It's easily accessible. That's the part that we're learning from all of these different platforms that can inform how we generate content for our learners in the future. When we do kind of start to put together a module now, we kind of start to think about what are the key points that we're trying to get to and strip back the elements that don't need to be in there, that typically make your module a lot longer. So lots of video, lots of music. That's kind of what we're learning from the TikTok generation, the Gen Zers.
And Dean, I think when we first spoke, I think you said that out of your whole employee base, I think there were like 14,000 people that fell within that Gen Z
Yeah,
population?
100% over the 10,000 mark that fall into that kind of category. It's a big part of our workforce, and if we're not adapting, then obviously we're pushing learning for learning's sake, and that's sometimes I think the trap that you fall into is a bit of a tick box exercise. But to step back as a as L&D specialist and kind of ask you a question of what are you trying to get the learner to get out of this content that they're looking at? That's a big part of it, I think. Not just kind of, right, we need to tick this box to make sure they've gone through that, but really asking the question, what are they going to retain when they go through this content? What's the stuff that they walk away with at the end? That's really key for me and the team.
Yeah, and I think TikTok has kind of largely proved what we already know about people, right? That at the moment they kind of prefer watching videos to reading and consuming really hefty content online. I guess it's about having the quantity and the speed of content without making it really overwhelming. I mean, I know that I go onto Netflix and I get completely overwhelmed with some of the content, so it's about making it really, really meaningful for that audience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's key, isn't it? And like you said, Lucy, to have that broadness of content, but have it kind of relevant to the topic in hand. That's really important as well. I think again, going back to, I've been in L&D now for around 17 years, so I've watched that journey of kind of how digital content gets developed, gets displayed, and we probably in the past have gone for a one size fits all for any topic. We kind of generate a piece of content. I think as L&D, you have to have that broadness of offering. You have to generate a video, you have to generate maybe a module, you have to generate an infographic, all around the same topic, because people are going to consume it in different ways, depending on their generation as well.
Definitely, and we've got a few comments here, Dean, around someone saying, I think it's Sophie, she thinks 25-minute modules are still too long for most people, but it has more to do with the module itself and that format, which actually takes us nicely into asking the question, is L&D still falling behind the curve? So you mentioned kind of going from kind of 45-minute modules to 20-minute modules. Are we still behind the curve? What next kind of needs to be done?
Yeah, it's a really good point, actually, in terms of it is going to be topic related, that of how much content needs to be in that module. But I do still feel that click-through modules are still the kind of first choice when it comes to generating digital content. And I scrape into the millennial category. I can hear my team laughing behind the scenes without, but I do just scrape into the millennial category. And again, I used to be wowed by seeing those click-through PowerPoints. They used to be really engaging in terms of what they are in digital content. But for the Gen Zers, it's no longer engaging. We have to kind of think about how do we shorten our content past the, under the 10-minute mark. How are we telling that story that has all the relevant learning in it in a really engaging, succinct way? Click-through modules, which seem to be the go-to for a lot of people. I'm going to put out, my hand up and say, we still do that. We still do click-through modules, but we definitely, over the past couple of years, are moving more towards how do we generate quick video content, either developed by ourselves or developed by end users, that hits the point, gets the point across that you're trying to, but in a very short, engaging way. And that in itself is a great way to start developing content for your learners. Is think about videos, think about how you can kind of develop shortened videos under 3 minutes long. Think about the point, the story that you're telling in them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we've got some really nice questions here from the audience, which I'd quite like to just jump into quickly. so Tom Dixon has asked, how do you think complex modules such as GDPR could be delivered using more of a TikTok approach? So have you got any experience, Dean, or even any advice from you, Lucy, around how you can kind of chop up some of those really meaty, more compliance complex topics?
Yeah, and actually GDPR, it's a really good one, and I kind of don't want to blow our own trumpet, but the team generated, I think, what we see as, particularly in that topic GDPR, it's not ever going to be the most exciting of topics, but again, what we've done was kind of strip back of what were the points that we wanted to kind of get to in this particular module. It is still in modular format, but what we've done is used a lot of video, a lot of animation through our GDPR content to get across the point of data security, all of those relevant points that need to be brought to life in a GDPR module. We've really thought about, well, actually, do we just put a regulatory piece of text that kind of shares the key elements of that sit behind data protection, or how can we better? And we've done a lot of curation for that module as well. We looked at what videos already existed on YouTube, on different kind of video platforms, and that's what we pulled in, and kind of it's still around a 10 to 15 minute module, but I think it's done in a really engaging manner with a variation on methods to engage the end learner. So yeah, that's how we approach GDPR. Obviously, there's lots of different ways you can do it. But also, I suppose in thinking in itself, you don't always have to kind of address the key elements in one module or one video. You can split it. You can kind of break it down. You can kind of get those key points across in multiple videos, so they feel like they're being consumed in a lot shorter time.
Hello, I'd like to add something. Now, as true to style, my laptop just absolutely crashed. So that's good, isn't it? I wanted to talk about L&D falling behind the curve, if I could, because I also think that we've got to be, and sorry if this has been covered and I might just be talking over everyone, but I think we've got to be mindful of the fact that well, the powers at play between both L&D and the business as well, right? So and ultimately, I mean, video has changed the way in which we learn, hasn't it? So apparently about 500 hours worth of video are uploaded onto YouTube every minute of the day, and over 70 searches on YouTube are for how-to videos. So again, that just shows how important having those really kind of bite-sized video-led courses are, and resources are to people.
Yeah, do you know what, Lucy? It was one of the first tasks that we kind of took. You know, myself and the digital team have only existed for a very short time in Nando's. Probably for the past 4 years, we've been, the digital team, digital learning team. One of the first things that we undertook was converting what we call recipe cards, which is ultimately how to kind of create some of our products for our front of house teams. And we changed those into videos. So we changed each one into a bite-sized video. So myself and the team shot over 120 videos converting those recipe cards and made them accessible, made them something that people could watch when they're, traveling into work or when they're on their lunch break. And that landed really well. So just kind of that approach to how do you take what exists already within your business and how do you translate that into a format that, again, for the TikTok generation is really digestible and accessible as well.
Yeah, and I was having a really interesting conversation with a colleague this morning on the train, and she was recounting a conversation with a client yesterday, and talking about how they can go back to kind of blended learning in essence, but they were really scared of changing the way that they do kind of pre and post learning. So, one of the ideas was, well, that pre and post can use like really short snippets of videos, and they were really nervous about moving away from those traditional kind of filling out
a sheet and tick boxing before you actually get to a program. So have you managed to kind of pivot towards that as well at Nando's?
Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic pushed everybody in that direction, and I think we've got quite a forward-thinking learning and development team. That nostalgic feeling of actually, there's some things that have been done in L&D for a very long time that almost happened because they've just been there always. I think Cassie and I were speaking about, the fact that most modules now end with a test. And some have relevance, but when you're asking yourself, what's the point of having that test on the end? It becomes a bit of a generation game moment, doesn't it? Just remembering everything you went through in that particular time period and then testing you at the end. It's whether they retain that information, a week's time, 2 weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. So that test at the end, which I don't think it's for everybody. I do agree there's going to be certain modules that it has relevance to, but we've got into a habit now of, if a test don't need to be there, stripping it out. It's just one of those things that have been done in L&D for a very long time that often doesn't need to be in there.
Yeah, I love that. And we've just got a comment from Matt talking about there's still a lot of conversation about generating and consuming content, but what do you build in to get your viewers to engage and interact with that content, e.g. quizzes? It doesn't have to be a test at the end. But we've been having chat in the group as well. I think Matty mentioned and Sophie mentioned something about communities, and I think that's another really good way of activating that learning, is by discussing it and commenting and discussing it with your peers and sharing it with people that might find it useful. So that question's generated some really great conversation in the chat as well. But just to keep us going, we've spoken a little bit about different varieties of content and different formats of content, and I had a question that I'd love you to start off, Lucy, around gone one too far, just around about our way of thinking and kind of how Thrive's content reflects this way of learning, and kind of what you've done in the team to kind of bring L&D forward and make them go beyond the curve.
Yeah, thank you. So we're doing a lot of work at the moment about how we reposition our content, and the way in which we present it to clients and the learners as well. So and we've done a lot of speaking with all of our customers, actually, to see what they'd like and how they'd like it. I think there's a big kind of content shock if we're not careful. So we really want to make good and meaningful content. We've got some really big plans that we've all been driving here at Thrive, and that's to really increase the amount of resources that we have available. But I guess I refer back to that content shock, because what we don't want to do is develop lots and lots of content that no one really wants, and that just becomes quite confusing to the eye. So what we're also doing is putting in kind of learning pathways, and taking a real campaign-led approach for our learning as well. And one of the things that I love most about Thrive, there are lots of things actually, is the fact that we're almost kind of changing the way that we've positioned ourselves in the market. So we employ copywriters instead of instructional designers. So everything is very much very purposeful. And if I think about kind of how marketeers position their content and PR organisations, we're definitely following that trend. It's a really exciting time.
Definitely. And I think there's a lot of chat at the moment in the group, just on the kind of previous topic, around user-generated content and kind of content strategy, and kind of where some of this micro learning, short bites like infographics, all this kind of variety of different content formats fits in with things like user-generated content as well. And I think at Thrive, we're a big fan of user-generated content. It's kind of at the heart of our LXP, and the the content that kind of Lucy's talking about and user-generated content works really well together to complement how people learn. But one of the questions here for you, Dean, is asking your view on content offering and people creating their own content as well.
Yeah, and this for me is definitely a go-to for any learning and development function. Just one, to keep up with the way that Gen Zers consume content. Then consuming it at massive amounts. If you're generating one module a week or however many modules your team are generating, it won't be enough for them. So tapping into that user-generated content, it's a massive thing, and it comes from an audience as well, or speaks massively to the audience because they're familiar with the people generating that content. Over lockdown, some of the content that we used in some of our comms apps posts was stuff that was posted to TikTok anyway by our Nandockers, and it's amazing. They're so familiar and so comfortable being on the other side of the camera, speaking to the camera. They're so creative. They're so good at storytelling in such a short period of time. If you're not tapping into that, then I think you're losing out massively. Definitely, user-generated content for us is going to be a big focus for the future as well. It's, I suppose, the balance is how do you make sure that the content that is being shared is the right stuff for your business, and that's just based on individual businesses, how they want to kind of tap into that user-generated content.
Awesome. So I will move us swiftly on. So we've spoken about kind of bringing traditional content, e-learning content, and moving that forward with kind of different formats, bite-sized content, micro-learning content, and we've spoken a little bit about UGC. What does all of this mean for your learners, Dean, and kind of what are the purposes of why we're here today and kind of the conversation that we're having?
I think, you know, it's a transition that learning and development functions are going through at the moment, and being conscious of actually you're dealing with typically two generations now, and therefore you've got to kind of consider all of your offering and how you kind of want to share content. Gen Zers, like mentioned at the start, have a very short attention span. So therefore you need to kind of have micro learning available. It needs to be easily accessible. So kind of anything that takes multiple clicks to get into is going to kind of put off your learners. So how do you make it easily accessible? It's also got to be familiar with them. It's got to tell stories. Whatever content you generate has got to tell a story in a very succinct way. And it's got to kind of consider how you can utilize video, how you can utilize audio within your offering as well. It's a massive thing in terms of where your focus should be as a learning and development function, how you're generating content, how you're making that content available for your learners as well.
Awesome, that's great, Dean. I've got a couple of community questions here. One asking, what is the percentage split between user-generated content and L&D content?
However you want to position it, I think. I don't think there is a kind of, you know, a percentage that should be split. There's going to be some really poignant topics that you need to cover as an L&D function, but opening the doors and allowing individual users to generate content is a great way for filling your learning library. Some of it's going to be relevant, some of it's not going to be relevant, some of it's going to be tie into some of the topics that you're talking about, some of it isn't. But I suppose in any content generation, if it's driving footfall to whatever platform you're using, that's a real positive thing. You only need to go on TikTok and kind of scroll through maybe 5 to 6 videos, and before you know it, you're watching a video about an investment without really realizing it. And that's a real clever way of doing things. It's driving football, it's kind of you're watching stuff, and within that content that has a real purpose. I think, again, that's something that we can learn a lot about in L&D, is just driving footfall to your platforms. There's going to be times when people look at content that isn't necessarily something that they would normally look at, but has a real purpose for the business as well.
Yeah, and I think that leads really nicely onto our next question, Dean, around top tips to engage the TikTok generation. You spoke a little bit there about driving footfall to your platform or footfall to your content. If you had to give kind of like your top 5 tips to engage your Nandockers, what would it be?
Yeah, I suppose, as I said there on the slide, understand your audience. I'm very aware that sometimes I'm not aligned to Gen Zers, so I challenge myself to go, well, why are you trying to generate content? So often we have either user generated content, or we spend time with our what we class as Nandockers, asking them what's the kind of thing that they want to see, what kind of thing would engage them. So that's really important, understanding your audience, and whether that is you doing the research yourself or going out and kind of asking the learners directly or getting them to come up with ideas is really key for us. The topics that are relevant, I think you touched on earlier with Lucy, Cassidy, mental health was a real key thing for us at the start of last year, going into lockdown. We've done a massive campaign around Mental Health at Work Week, and we use such a broad range of content, and it had such a good engagement with our audience that you just need to understand the relevance of your topic, where it fits in with the end user. Thinking about Gen Zers, what are important to them at the moment? What are the key topics that they're talking about, whether that be via TikTok or different social media platforms, and tap into that. As it says there, and I'm really guilty of this, when we started generating content in the early days, I was so set on it being branded and having all of our logos on and familiar music and stuff like that. You can spend a lot of time branding your content, but it doesn't have to be. The fact that you're sharing it internally, people know that it comes from Nando's or comes from that internal part. So spending lots of times having a branded version of your content can mean that you're spending less time thinking about the end user, or thinking about more content that would be purposeful for the end user. So it doesn't necessarily have to be polished every time. The odd video, obviously, it's nice to do a kind of very cinematic piece depending on what you're shooting, but most of the time the end user, look at some of the videos on TikTok, they're really interested in how they're generated and what they use to depict different genders and stuff like that. Towels on heads, and I find that interesting, but it just goes towards actually you don't need to have a polished video.
Yeah, I love that thought, actually, because actually what we see on Instagram and TikTok posts are so quick, aren't they? And you never really see characters more than once, and that's one of the ethos with some of the resources that we put together, right? Because they're not branded to Thrive or anyone, so and that's really important for us as well, so that our customers don't get bored. They don't see the same character on everything that we do. There's a real definite different mix of themes that are presented and developed for our customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think Matty said it best. He's just said, nobody ever learned better because of a company logo in the corner of a screen.
It's so true. Companies are still really stuck on that, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. It's a big thing for us. I think, something, like I said, habit that I needed to kick on that one.
Definitely. And we've just got another comment saying branding is so irrelevant, but I do think it's important to find and create content that fits well with your brand language. That's a really nice comment. And I think that reflects what you said earlier, Dean, a little bit about offering things that are relevant and human, and the way that you speak and the way that, our content in our catalogues kind of spoken as well is really human and has that friendly tone of voice. because for us at Thrive, it's all about the people, it's all about culture. Lucy, is there anything you want to add around things that you do in the content team that engage the TikTok generation?
Yeah, I guess for us it's about creating really sustainable learning, and not only that, but telling clients ahead of time what we are developing. So I take Pride for example, or kind of the mental health awareness months. It's about us developing content ahead of time and then telling customers about it so that they don't have to create their own, because they can use ours. We are in the process of mapping lots of really exciting pathways that customers can use as well, and those pathways are in essence kind of the new blended learning, really, because there are a lot of different assets strung together that you can consume either individually or within that pathway. Building campaigns as well. So I think we mentioned earlier, didn't we, about how that kind of campaign-led approach is really important, especially for that generation, I feel, who are really taken by lots of pictures and doing the right thing as well. What else are we doing? Working with our clients to really help fill those content gaps as well. So taking on board some of the feedback. We've got big pushes on mental health awareness as well, as you'd imagine, and well-being, which is still really up there with all of our clients that we speak to. And again, I guess in terms of going back to your initial question, Cass, it's about creating really meaningful resources, and helping with that kind of cognitive load. So only really developing content with really necessary sound bites of information in, segmenting, so putting learning into modules, making it really easy to consume, and using signaling, so using cues to get learners' attentions as well, and yeah, within kind of that six minute bites of learning.
Definitely. I think that's the main thing for me on this as well, is that authenticity, short and sweet, and that timely and trending thing as well. I think that's a big thing on TikTok, isn't it? Like, things that get loads of engagement is because it's timely, it's a trend, loads of people are kind of jumping in on that. And I think in the world of learning, that's really important as well, to be able to be reactive to what's going on in the world. And your Pride example was really great. And we actually did something as well for Black Lives Matter last year, because it was a really important topic for us. And we managed to turn around a suite of content based on that really quickly. So for us, it's about being timely and be able to react to what the world is talking about, because they're meaningful conversations that we believe people within organisations should have as well. Have you got all your points covered, Dean? I think there was a couple more around getting your team members involved that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big thing for us. Kind of whenever a video gets shot, typically we're looking for people who out in the business to appear in the videos. It speaks massively to the learners. Again, if they've kind of seen someone familiar on screen, there's more engagement with that. We have a great program called Bring Your Outside In. And this is where not only are we getting people to appear in the videos, but often we tap into skill sets that we know exist out in our business. A good example of this is we have people come and film the videos. So they could be studying film at university. They could be, it might just be a hobby for them, but they have a skill set that is massively beneficial to the business. So what we do is kind of tap into that, and often we get people come and shoot the videos for us. They're massively creative, they've got a great skill set, and the end video is amazing. So it's a big thing for us, is making sure that we're getting everybody involved in different areas, like front of the camera, behind the camera, the editing side of things as well.
I love that, and the more people that you get involved across the business, the more people want to be involved as well. It's almost who wants to be, almost the old-fashioned gamification, isn't it?
Yeah,
people really want to see their own face on there.
And sorry, Dean.
I was just going to say, Cassie, I think where this came in for us was, you know, some of the people that we've had come along and do this for us, shoot videos, or one of the guys who you'll have to get your head around the Nando's language is called a photo docker. Obviously, they're particularly focused on taking photos and stuff like that. He ended up with a job with our group company, just because of obviously we're moving from restaurant, shooting some images for us, whether that be kind of product images or going to events. And then from that, he got a job with our group. Yeah, he's still there now, doing amazing work, traveling around the world.
I love that.
I
Great
love
story.
That and that links really nicely to a question that somebody asked earlier around the skills to help you kind of pull this off, Dean. I can't find the question now in the chat, it's kind of buried, but it was something along the lines of, how have your skills within your team, or the skills of the people kind of helping you create and deliver content, evolved?
Oh, this is really good, actually. I'm going back again. I mentioned at the start that, you know, as a digital team, we've only probably existed for 4 years. And I do remember when myself and another gentleman called Gareth started off in the team, and we had a Handycam and a GoPro. That was our toolkit. And, you know, we started generating content using that, which was really good. But obviously over time, we realized that we needed to kind of have better audio. We need to kind of probably have a bit more polished in certain kind of topics that we were shooting. So we went about kind of using YouTube. We started to develop ourselves. And then with my team members, what they're really good at, and more skilled than I could ever be, is using a different kind of creative suite, tapping into that kind of, particularly one of them focusing maybe on generating graphics, the other one generating video, and that editing skill set. So between themselves, they're constantly developing themselves to enable them. They're looking at content and seeing how they can challenge themselves to be more creative with their content. So it's really good to see. I'm really proud of my team, how they have developed themselves over the past couple of years to be able to generate some of the content that we have. And it's all kind of self-developed. They're just kind of using the tools that are available on the internet, and that's basically how they're developing themselves and how we're creating some really good content.
I love it. And talking about skills development as well, we work from the marketing team, work really closely with the content team, and all that amazing stuff that Lucy was just talking about around campaigns is really how the content team are developing our customers as well, in terms of how to create engagement by delivering campaigns, and kind of some of those marketing skills that we really encourage our customers to get involved in are really important in this day and age, I think, especially when it comes to engagement and, you know, creating a buzz and building a hype, and all of that kind of campaign delivery piece that Lucy was talking about earlier, I think is really helping L&D teams upskill as they deliver great content as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, Lucy.
No, I completely echo everything that you've said. I think I've mentioned previously about how I love that Thrive is kind of pivoting more to a PR and marketing focus, and the best example of that is having copywriters as opposed to, you know, your traditional instructional designers. So and yeah, like you said about the campaigns, I think it's a really cool time actually that we can really help L&D teams, definitely.
Awesome. And we've got a few more questions, but just before we get into them, Lucy, I wanted to quiz you a little bit, because I know something big is around the corner. If anyone on here follows us on LinkedIn, which I hope and I'm sure that you all do, we all know that something exciting is on the way. But Lucy, I don't know if you've given much away already, but what
I don't know whether I have.
I'm not sure. But what can you tell us a little bit about what is coming up? And then we will get stuck into some of these questions that I can see in the chat and in the Q&A.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Cass. So yeah, it's a really exciting time. So we're increasing our resources to 500 by the end of the year and up to 1,000 by the end of next year. We're also going through to translate translations as different languages. With those is making sure they're localized as well, so that we're not just dubbing them over and making them sound a bit crappy. So we're going to do all of that. I think I mentioned earlier about lots of resources is great, but we don't want to overwhelm everyone with lots and lots of content. So we're putting together pathways. We've already mentioned campaigns and working really closely also with our customers. So like Dean, to say, look, what are your L&D focuses for the next 6 to 12 months? Tell us what they are, and then we can kind of match our content to those strategic initiatives. So really help to fill those content gaps, and also filling those content gaps whilst I'm on to that subject. We're really keen on not just creating content for the sake of creating content. So we want to hear feedback from our customers and potential customers about what's going to be most relevant to them. So, and I think Cassie, you mentioned earlier about the Pride campaign, about how quickly we were able to stand up that content. I was talking to another customer a couple of weeks ago, and they said, have you Natasha's Law, that's coming out in October, or that's going through government in October, that would be really good content to have out. And Natasha's Law, that would be really great for you as well, I guess, Dean, because it's Natasha's Law is all about making sure that all of the ingredients lists, all the packaged food include all of the ingredients on them. So I took it to our head of production, Al, who is sunning herself in Brighton at the moment, and she said, that's a brilliant idea, let's do it straight away. So that's just an example of how we want to listen, take on feedback from our customers, and then we can develop content really quickly for them.
I love that. And if anyone's on today and you want to give us some content ideas, or if you want to, share what big campaigns or initiatives or, content that you've got coming up, feel free to write them in the chat now. And then we can take that away and kind of have a conversation about it. So we've got about 10 minutes for some questions. So let's dive into it. Thank you for that, Lucy.
You're welcome.
So, Dean, the first question is for you, and Anonymous wants to know what is Nando's approach to their team members who come from an older generation? Is there anything that you do to kind of bring them on this TikTok approach journey with you?
Yeah, it's a good point, and something that I was really conscious of coming onto this, talking about a TikTok generation. We still have a massive amount of millennials and different generations coming through. We still have a massive amount of content that services those generations, different modules, and like I said before, it's the broadness of consideration of the content that you're generating, and not just doing one medium for it, but considering actually what is the preference for consuming this content. If I was a millennial, if I was a Gen Zer, if I was from a different generation, how would I want to consume this? And having that broadness of approach is a really key way of doing it. So not just being a kind of a generator video, because a majority of our audience are Gen Zers. Obviously, it's the relevance of the topic as well, but really being considerate of that. And again, that's with my team, Learning Technologies, working with the wider L&D team to make sure that we have content that is aligned and threaded through.
Yeah, amazing. And Lucy, have you got anything to add to that around our catalogue of content, and how kind of there is something for everyone with all those kind of different formats that we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. And something that we're going to be doing more of going forward is developing content that's using kind of a multiple of formats as well. So not just PDFs, but also podcasts as well. So and yeah, we're still going to have those longer compliance-led courses, but traditionally but kind of more on we're going to be moving more to those quick animations and those video-led approaches.
Love it. Next question for you, Dean, is from Andrew, asking, with this new approach to learning, has traditional half-day classroom style training ceased to exist? Very good question.
It's really interesting. I think when we talk about, or when we eventually get to a place where, you know, we're consistently doing classroom training again, the consideration will be the purpose of that. We tend to use our face-to-face training for facilitated conversation, knowledge share, so not necessarily the sharing, a one-way share of knowledge. It's really that 70-20-10 model of that 20% shared experience. We're facilitating conversations in that environment. I don't necessarily know if it will, you know, totally get rid of that. I think, again, it's a generational thing, isn't it? Some people quite enjoy having that time spending with different peer groups, speaking about their experiences, and that's massively beneficial for learning and development as well. But our typical approach at the moment is being really considered of our pre and post work before we have any type of facilitated conversation, just so we're not trying to kind of squeeze everything in to a half-day session or a full-day session, because a majority of it is done via video conferencing at the moment.
Yeah, and I also wonder, so blended learning has been a term that's been used for years and years, right? But I wonder if now actually is the time where L&D and other suppliers of learning will speed up their delivery of blended learning as well, because you know, I used to work for a big classroom training business, and they had to really quickly pivot what they were doing. But they're going to go back the other way again. I can totally see it. So, but I don't think. I think that blend and that mix of face-to-face is still really important, as well as having those other resources kind of pre and post, during as well, because as you say, you know, that the 70-20-10 rule as well, that will really feed into that. And if you keep on going with some small nuggets of kind of video animation learning over a 3-month period, maybe, then they have a better chance of retaining that information.
Definitely. So our next question is from Sophie, Dean, and Sophie's asking, how do you balance freedom of expression and discriminatory views which could cause offence with user-generated content? Does it police itself, or does it take significant resource from your L&D team?
Yeah, I did. And again, this is something we do get the opportunity at the moment, where every video that we do see, we post on behalf of our users. So we are utilising what we consider a comms app to share some of that learner content. Future, then, this is from past experience, is as long as you're clear with the principles of, you know, what crosses the line, what doesn't, and this very much a HR orientated principles. This is what you can and can't do when it comes to user generated content. Then that is the best approach that I've seen. It doesn't mean that you have to overload every piece of content that comes through, but obviously if something does get shared that crosses that line, then it's quite clear what the consequences are.
Yeah, and from a Thrive LXP point of view, we get this question all the time. I think it's the most common question that we get on webinars, and our answer to that is you trust your people to, you know, have an email address, to represent your company on social media, to have a LinkedIn that represents your company. Why wouldn't you trust them to share helpful, relevant, meaningful content on an internal platform as well? I think we probably have, you know, well over 150 customers now, and I think I've only ever heard one story of a piece of user-generated content being taken down, and that was simply because they used a swear word, and there was a really you know, helpful feedback conversation, and someone just said, you know, we're going to upload it again. It was a really amazing piece of content, but we're just going to take that swear word out. And that's the kind of the only case in the last like 3 years that we've seen, and we probably have like 95% of our clients using user generated content and having that turned on within their platform. So yeah, really interesting that you asked that question. So hopefully that kind of gives you another layer to that answer as well. Dean, Steph is asking, how can L&D get end users on board with sharing more content?
Yeah, this is really good, isn't it? It's depending on what you're trying to get them to share. I think if you're too scripted and you're too direct with what you're trying to get out of the video, and this is purely from an experience point, so there might be some more kind of scientific approach to how you could get more content generated from this. But where I've seen less people be involved is when you're too direct with what you want the video to look like. So, oh, could you make sure you mention this in there? Or could you make sure this is in the background? Being too prescriptive with what you want to get out of the video can often kill that user generated content. Whereas if you took out there what you want to get from the video and allow the end user to be creative with it, that's where I've seen a lot of really interesting, really creative content coming through. So I think, again, it would depend on your business. To kickstart stuff, you often can incentivize the purpose for it, you know, get a good campaign going around what content you want to see, how creative they can be, and putting a bit of an incentive behind it can also start to generate a lot of user content and user content.
Amazing. And we've got a few more minutes, but I think this is a really nice ending question. And I want to ask both of you this question, but Dean, let's go to you first. What is your best engagement tip of all time?
Best engagement tip. I'm a true believer, and again, I think this is a big miss out from often with L&D, is marketing and comms campaigns before your learning goes out. Those teaser campaigns before you launch any piece of content or any piece of learning are really key to generating excitement, interest about what learning you've got coming. When we've done that and we've done it really well, we see a massive uptake on the content. Obviously, your content needs to be amazing as well, but the marketing and comms that comes before it is really key to driving that engagement.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with all of that, and that's going to help when people are backing in more office environments, right, as well, because you can use the screens around offices to push out some of those key messages. I think for me, and some of the things that we prescribe to at Thrive, so the authenticity and creativity, and just like you said, Dean, just around kind of really making use of those campaigns and the pre-marketing activity as well.
Amazing. And then one final question that we've just got in here, Dean, is what have your users said? What have your learners said? So I guess that's all around feedback and kind of how the feedback has been from your Nandockers.
Yeah, I mean, again, really depending on the topic. We have some really big videos that get massive thumbs up. We also develop some stuff that doesn't go so well. But I think within our team, we're quite comfortable with that. And that for us is a massive learning process of generating content. You've got to be comfortable that sometimes you're going to generate a piece of content and you might put your heart and soul into it and think it's the best thing you've ever done. But then you might not get the engagement that you want or the likes or the views that you want from the end learner. But you've got to be comfortable with that. You've also got to be comfortable going and exploring why didn't it? And there's so many reasons why. It might not even be the content at the end of the day. It could just be when you've launched that piece of content, something else is going on in the wider world that means that people don't have that focus. But yeah, that for me is I'd like to think we generate a lot of content that our Nandockers like. But we also do some that don't land so well, but we're quite comfortable with that as well.
And Dean, I think one of our first conversations as well was back a couple of months ago when you were saying about using the Thrive content as well to really intersperse within those content conversations, and about how they some of those topics, especially during lockdown, kept people motivated and engaged, especially whilst quite a lot of them were on furlough as well.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, isn't it? Like I said, we have something internal called the Nando app, and it's a way we communicate with our Nandockers directly. It's a place where they can go, they can be updated, see what's going on within the business. As you've said, when lockdown came about, we knew that we wanted to engage with our Nandockers whilst they were at home, and the best way we found to do that was to kind of generate lots of content for them to access. And that for me is where Thrive massively came in, for the broadness of that content and the way that you guys do it. It was nice, it was accessible, it was digestible. It wasn't like they were logging on and completing a big module. It was truly bite-sized, and as mentioned earlier, the way that you guys tell stories, I think, is massively engaging, especially for Gen Zers as well.
Amazing. And I think that is the perfect note to leave today's webinar on. And it has just hit 1 o'clock as well, so we've just run out of time. So any last comments, Lucy and Dean, or are you happy for me to kind of close this up?
Yeah, happy. It's been really great chatting to you, Dean, and watching all of the comments come through as well, and those questions. It's been amazing. So thank you for joining us all.
Thank you both of all. I really appreciate it and really enjoyed just talking L&D sometimes. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice refreshing break, isn't it? So yes, also a big thank you from me, both to you, Dean, and to Lucy for joining us on today's webinar. As mentioned in the chat, I think Chris asked, will the recording be available? Absolutely. In the next couple of days, we'll be sending that out. So look out in your inboxes for the recording of the session, share it with your teams, colleagues, grandma, next door neighbours, whoever wants to see it. I'm sure they all do. I just wanted to say that our next live session will be all about how the team at Superdrug deliver campaign-led learning. So that'll be with Claire Reeves, who's their People Development Manager. So if you loved all that talk around campaign-led learning and kind of, you know, how to, you know, market your learning and those engagement tactics, definitely log on to that one. It will be live to sign up for in the next few days. So yeah, we'll be delving deeper into campaign-led learning. And by that point, we'll be able to reveal the big secret. Not that Lucy didn't reveal anything today, but we'll be able to reveal what is coming. That's on the 2nd of September at 2 p.m. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you have any questions in the meantime, please drop us a message. Our telephone number and Lucy's email address is on the screen there, and also connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to chat with you all and see all your comments and things like that. So thank you very much. I'm going to end it now. Thank you for all the lovely comments, and we will see you all soon.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Cass. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dean.
Bye, guys.